Well, let's take you back, the year 1964, and to a day where four boys by the name of George, Paul, John and Ringo touched down in Sydney town. Australia had never seen anything quite like it.
And listen to the crowd screaming too.
The Beatles arriving in Sydney in the early hours of June 11, 1964, to the screams of thousands of waiting fans.
Well, what do you expect to find here in Australia?
Australians.
A sound they'd become very used to, and one that would follow them as they toured the country.
Hundreds of fans have been crowding around the group's hotel today, shouting, "We want the Beatles." As for the four mop-tops themselves, here's what they have to say.
Who designed the Beatle jackets?
Pierre Cardin. Well, we made them into suits. I don't know whether he did.
Peter Cardin.
Peter Cardin, that's him.
The trip was far from smooth sailing. Illness struck Ringo, with Jimmy Nicol called in at the last minute to cover the first leg.
How do you feel being in with the Beatles, the newcomers, standing in for Ringo?
It's a good experience, man.
How is Ringo?
He's much better. He joins them on Sunday.
Ringo eventually joining the band in Melbourne for the tour's remaining dates.
Ringo, welcome to Australia. How do you feel about being here?
Oh, it's great. It's good fun, you know, once I'm off that plane.
Where night after night, fans spilled into the streets hoping to see their idols. Beatlemania gripped Australia for what would be their first and only trip as the Fab Four.
Well, John, I've said it 100 times already too, but I hope you have happy memories of your Australian trip when you get home and can think about it.
Thank you, Malcolm.
We will do. Thank you for your time.
How good is that old footage? I love it.
Amazing.
A new book about the famous tour has been put together by Beatles historian Greg Armstrong, who joins us in the studio now. Greg, great to see you. I mean, some of those scenes, especially when they landed in Australia, extraordinary, such was the hype for the Beatles.
Australia was absolutely ready for the Beatles to arrive, and in a short space of time they'd become legendary.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, we had never heard of a sound like the Beatles, never met four young kids like the Beatles, and they looked and sounded different from everything else.
Give us an idea of the hysteria.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the famous phrase Beatlemania was formed only in October in 1963, and it was swift. The hysteria, kids lined the streets to greet them. Adelaide, 300,000 officially to greet the Beatles.
Wow.
Melbourne, 250,000. Lining the streets on a Sunday afternoon in the middle of
there were
winter.
300,000 people in Adelaide, let alone...
South Australia population, just over 1 million. So it's huge numbers.
It is extraordinary. We heard in that package, obviously, there that Ringo also fell ill and they soldiered on without him, because how could you not, right? I mean, when all these adoring fans are waiting for that.
Exactly. And yet George Harrison didn't want to go out without Ringo. He said, well, if we can't go out with Ringo, you can get another guitarist as well. But that wasn't practical. No. We wouldn't have seen the Beatles in 1964 had they deferred. They'd only ever performed without one member before, 3 times, John Lennon in 1963. But that was around the UK. But a tour of the world, no, it's impossible.
I'd never even heard of Jimmy Nicol.
No, the world hadn't.
What's happened to him?
Not much. He's literally a recluse. We believe he's still alive. And he joined a couple other groups in 1960s. The Spotniks, the Swedish group, were a big one for him.
Yeah.
But after that, faded into oblivion, I'm afraid.
Wow. You've compiled this incredible book. How did you get access to all the photos? How did you bring all that together? It would have been difficult.
Well, it's a true labour of love, and myself and Andy Neal have worked hard to collect photographs. We're inquiring minds, and knowing our way around a good archive is very handy. So 2 decades just in the research, really, a couple of years to write it.
It's incredible, though, the legacy as well. Like, I saw Sir Paul McCartney when he was here in Australia last year. I mean, it's just incredible, the crowds that they pull and the way the music transcends time, really. Yeah.
We still hear about the Beatles. There's still news. Their new song last year, Now and Then, Peter Jackson's 8-hour Get Back documentary. I mean, they're still very fashionable. Yeah. And yet, 60 years since they came out to us.
Timeless. I mean, that is timeless. So how did you go putting it all together? I mean, I guess there's a lot of stuff around. Yeah. What was a surprise for you?
I think the surprise was really finding so many documents were still in archives, locked up under lock and key, and they weren't publicly available. And that we knew from the wealth of information that we really had to dig deep and try and put you know, a comprehensive book together, which is what we've done. And I think it's also capturing the voice of the people that were involved back in the 1960s, who sadly a lot of them are not with us today. So it was really talking to people who were there and getting the documents and the photographs.
It's a real time capsule, isn't it?
It really is.
It's awesome to take that trip.
Do you have a favourite?
Song or Beatle?
Yeah, song or Beatle.
Oh, well, my favourite Beatle is George Harrison, and She Loves You. It's a third single in Australia. She Loves You is fantastic.
All right.
Beautiful.
Good on you. Thanks so much.
Thanks
It's a
so
great
much,
piece of
Greg.
work.
Yeah,
Get out there and get
appreciate
your
it.
copy of When We Was Fab, Inside the Beatles, Australasian Tour, 1964, out now. So go and grab yourself a copy.